Hello, and welcome back. Today we have, playing through my Sega Genesis collection, number 9, Gargoyles. Developed by Disney Software and published by Buena Vista Interactive, Gargoyles is a 2D platformer released in 1995, and is based on the animated TV series of the same name. The game consists of 5 different levels, each of which is made up of various subsections. Prior to the start, some background information is provided, as the game begins in the year 994 AD. Viking sorcerers have created an artifact of incredible power and evil, the Eye of Odin. Mad with power, Viking invaders overran Castle Wyvern. Level 1, Evil Awakens, sees the player control Goliath as he fights his way through the castle, taking on enemies with a few basic attacks and combat strategies. Goliath can either slash to attack or throw the enemy to the ground, as well as jump and flap his wings for a second burst of height. Goliath can take multiple enemy hits before losing a life, and a health meter will be displayed on the bottom of the screen. This can be replenished by defeating enemies, as they will often drop a small amount of health recharge. If a life is lost, Goliath will respawn in the exact spot of death, and losing all lives will use up a continue. If that continue is used, and all lives are lost again, it is game over, and back to the start. Certain environmental objects can be climbed or even smashed through with a shoulder charge. This first level got the player acquainted with finding a path when it appeared to be a dead end, as well as climbing and dodging projectiles from different angles. Some environmental hazards were very tricky, and required a ton of persistence and practice to get the timing down. At times, the controls could be a bit wonky, as I would be constantly knocked off a wall or hit while airborne. These were made more difficult by the jumping mechanics, which weren't as responsive as I would have liked, and I often found myself just stubbornly powering through, as I would get frustrated by getting knocked back to the ground over and over. At the end of each level, there will be a boss fight. This first boss fight will see a Viking attack Goliath, with both a close-range hammer swing and a long-range lightning strike, while also teleporting between the attacks. Luckily, if you get the timing down just right, he will keep teleporting to the same spot, and can be hit over and over again before he can get a single hit in. The Viking army invaded the Rookery in a savage attempt to destroy the Gargoyle eggs and the entire race for all time. Level 2, Siege of the Rookery. This level sees Goliath traveling through cavernous ruins. At times, respawns, or in this case, dropping down a chasm, can result in getting stun-locked by infuriating enemies and taking massive damage before any counterattack can be done. But Goliath turns the tide and fights through. New in Level 2 is the ability to swing across gaps by grabbing ledges. Doing so on certain ones will unlock a burst of wind that can be rode to higher levels, or it will cut off the flow to reach a blocked off area. As Goliath reaches the second boss, the Eye of Odin transforms a Viking into a larger, more powerful form. This hammer-wielding foe can smash the floor, dropping Goliath to his death, but can also be stun-locked and taken down in short order. Though the Viking army was routed, Goliath was blamed for Castle Wyvern's destruction. As punishment, he was cursed to sleep in stone until the castle rested above the clouds. He waits. 1,000 years later, Castle Wyvern was rebuilt atop a skyscraper in downtown Manhattan, above the clouds. He waits no longer. Level 3, Stone and Steel. Now, Goliath takes on strange robotic enemies in a modern-day New York City, as the Eye of Odin continues to wreak havoc. These enemies were much stronger and could strategically shield, but can be taken down with careful timing. To reach new areas, Goliath can smash through buildings and swing to great heights. However, the hitbox on the swinging was very precise, as I would often jump right through it without grabbing anything, and drop far below to the beginning of a long climb. To make matters worse, there are certain flying enemies that will endlessly respawn, no matter how many times they are defeated. These will shoot at Goliath and attempt to hit him mid-swing, sending him all the way back down. This section was extremely frustrating at first, and took many tries to reach the top. But, after enough practice, it does get easier, as there is a nuanced flow and rhythm to the swinging that will assist in ensuring you grab the next ledge. At the end of the level, the Eye of Odin once again transforms a small enemy into a giant boss. This time, it is a scorpion. Goliath must carefully hang from the sides to take down each leg one by one. Get too close, and the scorpion will quickly strike Goliath down to his death, with very little time to react. Needless to say, this part was challenging, and a bit annoying, as I got knocked off too many times to count, or missed the side completely. Luckily, if you fail and get a game over like I did, Gargoyles does have level skip, so you can quickly get back to where you last died. Sega! Sega! Level skip will not jump to the next level entirely, but to the next subsection, so you don't have to start the level from the beginning. You can skip straight to the boss encounter, or whatever part you were at. After mastering the proper placement to avoid scorpion strikes, Goliath will get in close and finish the boss off with ease. The curse was lifted, but an ancient evil still haunts Goliath. The Eye of Odin has survived, to become a weapon for a new kind of army. Level 4, Subterranean Terror. Level 4 is a relatively short one in comparison to the others, and requires Goliath to travel across a high-speed train. To progress, he must smash into the lower level, smash between carts, and smash back to the roof, until he eventually reaches the end. At times, there will be some powerful enemies that stun lock you, as well as some narrow jumps that will drop Goliath under the train. For these jumps, it is essential to make sure you aren't hanging before you jump. If you are, you won't make it. With enough resilience, the final boss will be reached. This time, it is a group of robots that will fly around in formation. Each time a group is defeated, they will blow up part of the train, which sends in more robots. Nothing too bad here though. The only real attack to avoid is the Krang-like boost that will deal massive damage if not dodged. Once all the white robots are taken out, the final, slightly more powerful red robot will attack. The path to the Eye of Odin leads Goliath to the birthplace of the lethal robots that swarm the city. Level 5, The Forge. This final level sees Goliath fight through a massive and complex industrial building. This level was by far the most difficult yet, with intense pitfalls, tanky enemies, treacherous climbs, large falls, intricate swings, and conveyor belts, with fire all around. The Forge truly tests Goliath's adaptability and might. His mastery of the various strategies will be on full display, and must be utilized to reach the end. Or, as I did at times, brute force and willpower can also get it done. But this is definitely not the intended method. Finally, after a long and hard-fought journey, Goliath reaches the final boss of the game. The force behind the evil onslaught is revealed: Demana. With the Eye of Odin in her control, Demana is nearly invincible. But Goliath must stop her, somehow. The final fight consists of 3 unique phases. After striking the Eye of Odin, it will transform a robotic enemy into a fierce beast, and starts Phase 1. Goliath must try to get behind it to stun lock it, but can also strike it from the front. Doing enough damage will knock the Eye of Odin free, where it will travel higher up and transform another robot. Doing this enough times will reach the top of the tower, where Demana awaits. This second phase is straightforward and relatively easy, as Goliath must strike the eye while avoiding a swooping attack or projectile fireball. If you get the timing right, you can just keep jumping and punching it. However, the next and final phase was by far the most difficult and rage-inducing of the entire game. This single phase alone took me far longer than the rest of the game combined. The worst part is if you die in Phase 3, you have to start the boss fight from Phase 1, which isn't difficult by any means, just really repetitive. Demana must be attacked as she randomly and quickly flies around the screen at high speed. Standing on the middle platform will result in fireballs lighting it up and getting stun locked while taking massive damage. To avoid the middle, Goliath can climb the walls on the sides, but can also be knocked off by Demana. In addition, she can set fire to the walls and knock Goliath from safety. The only real safe spot was the top in the center, as Demana could hit Goliath from almost anywhere. This encounter resulted in many cheap deaths. I tried looking up several different strategies, but had no luck. Eventually, I discovered a method that worked best for me. From the start, immediately jump to the lower left side of the left wall. Then, you have to read Demana's movements for different patterns. If she moves from the bottom right to the top left, I immediately jump back to the middle to avoid her setting the wall on fire, and then jump right back to the bottom left wall. What you are hoping for is her movement to go from the bottom left to the upper right. If this happens, she will then move towards you from the upper right to the lower left. However, you can't wait until you see her coming, as it will likely be too late. Getting hit will totally screw you, as you can either fall to your immediate death or get stuck in the middle, where the platform will instantly be ignited. Not to mention, Demana can fly into you at a moment's notice. What you have to do is get a feel for the timing, and slash at her just before she would appear on screen, so that you hit her right as she gets in range. This technique was the only consistent one I could get, and took many hits, but eventually, Demana is defeated, and the game ends. Overall, Gargoyles was a really fun platformer, and another solid Disney Sega Genesis game. The environments were beautifully dark and gothic, with a good mix of Viking soldiers and futuristic robots. The controls were simple, but offered a good variety of techniques. The biggest drawback was the general wonkiness in the movement and difficulty in grabbing ledges to swing from, but eventually you get used to the mechanics. The level design was complex and a bit confusing at first, but is exactly how an old school game is supposed to play. You go in blind at first and figure things out as you go. With each subsequent run, everything comes together and the path forward becomes clear. After a while, you will master each and wonder how you struggled to begin with. But the final boss fight was a struggle that can't be understated. With no real strategy to employ or movements to read, it felt difficult and annoying just for the sake of being so, with no clear path to victory. Eventually, I found something that worked, but it was still hard to get consistent, but at least it got the job done. This is one of those games where I would love to see the developers play their own boss fight. I recommend this game for anyone that enjoys 2D platformers, especially those fans of the original TV show. If you have played any other Disney game on Sega Genesis, then this is another you can sink your teeth into, and you won't be disappointed. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time for playing through my Sega Genesis collection, number 10.